hardest part about working with aliens and saving humanity from extinction is constantly having to come up with names for stuff. Hello and welcome back to Rehydrate. This season we'll be reading and discussing Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary. This is Season 10, Episode 3, Adrian, covering chapters 15 to 22. The hosts have varying levels of knowledge of this book. My name is Dan and I've only read up to this part.
My name is Talia. I've read the entire book and I'm rereading along with Rehydrate.
My name is Priya and I'm also rereading the book along with my co-host.
All right, well, I don't think we have any follow-up for this week, so I think let's just jump into the summary, which is going to be quite extensive for this part of the book. So Talia is going to help us go through that.
Sure, let's get into it. In a flashback on Earth, Ryland meets a coma expert who confirms that only certain individuals with coma-resistant genes have a chance at survival. Ava Stratt insists that everyone involved be tested for these genes, including herself and Ryland. Though Stratt never tells him, Ryland is confirmed to be a match. On the Hail Mary, Rocky and Ryland now begin doing science together to figure out how to save their planets. Rocky enters the Hail Mary in a geodesic ball with life support system. And in the first of many discussions about time, Rocky tells Ryland that he has been alone in the system for 46 Earth years. That his planet faces a far more gradual decline than Earth, even accounting for Iridian's longer lifespans. For his part, Rocky discovers that time passes differently under relativistic speed, explaining previous mysteries about why he has additional fuel in his storage. Bittersweetly, this means he has plenty of astrophage fuel to offer Ryland hope of escaping his suicide mission. Rocky begins constructing xenonite chambers inside the Hail Mary so that the two can continue deeper experiments and save both planets. In a flashback, Stratt assembles a crew with these coma-resistant gene markers along with backup crew and strictly mandates their separation during risky travel. In addition to this, she has a wide range of criteria for crewmates that strikes Ryland as sexist and racist. However, Ryland, now the world expert on astrophage, is assigned to train both crews on astrophage biology. Back on the Hail Mary, Rocky and Ryland set their sights on the astrophage Holmes planet in the Tau Ceti star system, which they name Adrian after Rocky's mate. Upon falling into Adrian's orbit, Ryland performs an EVA to collect samples. The planet's methane-rich atmosphere suggests the potential for biological activity. An evaluation of the samples reveals a diverse ecosystem, which leads to a potential light bulb hypothesis. If astrophage has a predator, that could rescue the afflicted planets. The renewed sense of hope leads Ryland to teach Rocky a celebratory fist bump. A flashback reveals Ryland's training in a NASA lab, and there is some oversharing of personal dynamics by crew members, where they disclose that the primary and backup crewmates are in a relationship, despite knowing that in a few months, one of them will travel to their death. Back on the Hail Mary, although Ryland and Rocky fell into Adrian's orbit, the outer atmosphere, where it is safe to venture, yields nothing, and they need to build a collection device and chain links from scratch, and then Ryland must retrieve this under extreme conditions. Their efforts pay off, but upon re-entry, the ship suffers damage that throws it into a spin. The G-forces nearly kill Ryland, but Rocky risks his life to save Ryland by breaching his life support and entering his environment. Upon becoming conscious, Ryland in turn hauls Rocky back to the safety of his own environment and suffers considerable injuries in the process. Upon regaining consciousness, Ryland works on a solution to stabilize the sample he retrieved from Tau Ceti and clear Rocky's system of the damage sustained by his exposure to oxygen. The treatment works, or so he thinks. When Rocky wakes up, he tells Ryland that he actually interfered with his healing process, and he almost died. In a flashback, the Earth crew members discuss their preferred methods for elective death at the end of the mission. Days before launch, a tragic accident kills both carefully selected primary and backup crew member. On the ship, Ryland studies the sample retrieved from Adrian and discovers the amoeba that is voraciously consuming astrophage, and names it Taumeoba. Ryland loses all power to his ship and discovers to his horror that the Taumeoba has infiltrated the Hail Mary's fuel tanks, rendering the entire ship inoperable and all of the fuel contaminated. Rocky's systems are still functional, so together they formulate a plan to use the uncontaminated Beetle return probes along the Hail Mary to travel back to the Blip A, Rocky's ship, where more astrophage fuel can be collected.
And next we have the new characters that are introduced in this book, and Priya's going to walk through those.
So besides our recurring Rocky and Rylan team, we have Dr. Lamai, who is a biotech expert who developed the Coma technology. We have an engineer named Steve Hatch who designed the beetles that are aboard the project, the Hail Mary. And then we have the crew members who are Commander Yao, the mission commander, Chinese Air Force officer, experienced astronaut and leader. We have Alessia Ilyukina, who is the Russian scientist and engineer who has expertise in mechanical systems. Then we have Martin DuBois, who has 3 doctorates, physics, chemistry, and biology. And he also dies in an explosion. And then we also have Annie Shapiro, who is a scientist working alongside DuBois, and she also tragically dies in the same explosion.
All right, thank you very much. So I think let's dive into impressions. So I think last time I said that I enjoyed the Earth stuff more than I enjoyed the space stuff, but I don't think that's the case for this one. I mean, not that I didn't enjoy the Earth stuff as well. I thought that was all interesting. I think you guys have stronger feelings on it than I do, based off of our initial conversations. But I mean, like, I liked the space stuff. I liked like they got past the. I think like what was kind of not bothering me, but like I felt was kind of dragging. Last one is that the communication part was just taking too long. It was like we kind of got the point that like, oh yeah, it takes a while for communication to be established or whatever. And this one I liked. It kind of just started with that. It was the communication's already there, right? Like they already have that established. They could just kind of talk, and and even like they have a rapport. Even like they introduce sarcasm later on, which is good. Like they're past like the point of just like communicating. Now they're just like two colleagues. I thought that was good.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of what we tried to capture in the summary are these like really important plot points, like breaching systems and discovering the scientific facts about Taumeoba and the astrophages themselves and xenonite. But so much of what this section actually delved into is like exactly what you said, Dan. The fact that they're literally and metaphorically sharing the same space now. So they're no longer like sending each other signals through distant ships. They're like in the same place, speaking the same language, or close enough. So that's when we actually really get into more story.
I think the major complaint I would have about this section would be the main action sequence, right? Where they're leaving Adrian, and then the ship starts like going end over end because there's a hole in it, whatever. It was just confusing for me to read. Like I had to like read it really slowly, and even then I still don't really have a good grasp of like how all this stuff is happening and like what's exactly happening. I mean, I know in general.
So let's break it down. You say like the main action sequence. You mean like the disaster or?
Yeah, the disaster. Like, but yeah, like the major inciting incident in this part of the book, right? Or in this part, yeah, this part of the reading. Where Rocky gets seriously injured. It's like a lot of things are happening, and maybe that's the point, right? Maybe things just it's meant to be like super. It's happening super fast. I just had a hard time kind of differentiating what is actually happening, other than it's really dangerous and that they're tumbling end over end. I mean, I got it. Like they're having there's a hole in the ship, and he has to eject the fuel canisters because there's because the radiation like burnt a hole in it, right?
It's funny how you just contrasted right there, like the confusion around the actual inciting incident and then the perfect crystal clarity in the emotional connection. Like it's very clear that like Rocky is injured, and those are the first like very real stakes, or like the highest escalation of stakes. I would say the first time we had stakes introduced is when it's discovered that Earth is in danger and the only way to save it is a suicide mission. But even that's a little abstract. And then like having one of the two characters possibly facing death and like being really valiant is just so much more clear and resonant than are we spinning or not spinning, or is the problem like too much fuel or not enough fuel?
I think that this is a very different kind of sci-fi than what we often or more often read traditionally, which is sci-fi that's a bit more grounded in the philosophy behind something versus sci-fi that tries to bring in a lot of the concepts and is very concept driven. So I feel like a reader like me enjoys this book more so for the more emotional parts of it, which is the ability of an alien life form to evolve similarly to a human life. And this discussion around, well, why did we evolve in a way where we are even able to have these conversations with each other? We're able to understand these things together. Why do we think at the same rate? Why do we experience these things the same way? And the explanations that he comes up for these things are fascinating to me. That, oh, you would have to learn to think at a certain speed based off of how fast your prey moves and things like that. Like, these explanations are more interesting to me than the descriptions of how the ship is moving and why the ship malfunctioned, and like all of this. I enjoy more when it's kind of in the periphery. They're like, okay, well, if the part that tells you that the ship malfunctioned was half a page instead of 5 pages, I would appreciate that more. But then there's also an audience who loves to get into the gritty science of it. And I feel like those parts appeal more to that audience. And then these other parts that get into how we evolve the same way, and how is it that we have customs on both of our planets, even though we're such different sorts of creatures, is more fascinating to an audience like me, or reader, I should say. So I feel like what's fascinating is he kind of like appeals to both types of readers. And I don't know, that's not an easy thing to do, because I can find myself tuning out of like the more sciencey bits. And I really like science, but this is like more of like a mathematical kind of science. I can tune out of that and still understand what's happening in the story, which is pretty cool, I think.
Well, I think it's interesting you just used the word like audience and then corrected to reader, but I think it's worth thinking about how this will be received with an audience. And I do think it's going to be a really sick action sequence to like have the ship malfunction and have something go wrong. And it's going to be so crystal clear in a movie, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a story like this really, really lends itself very well to a cinematic presentation, because on the page you have to get into, or you don't have to, you can write this without getting into all the nitty gritty science. You can render it on the page without it too, but then you'd have a much shorter book. And I think it's going to play out on the screen really, really well, because in the screen, on screen, in a visual presentation, you don't have to explain all of this science stuff.
It's sort of a weird, not even complaint, but just like, I kind of wish I didn't know there was going to be a movie of this, because like when I'm reading it, I just think about how it's going to be portrayed on screen rather than like imagining like what it looks like, you know, like, oh, how that, and like as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, how they're going to film that? Like, what are they going to cut out those parts because that might be boring or whatever? Like, I don't know. I kind of wish like I just didn't know there was a movie happening.
I'm going to remind you that we read Dune on this podcast, which is famously called the unfilmable book.
Yeah. I don't know. It just kind of detracts from my reading experience. Not detracts. I don't know. It just like
It shapes it maybe.
Yeah, it doesn't like. I'm not always like focused on like imagining the world enough, rather than imagining how they could possibly make a movie of it. If that makes sense. I don't know.
Interesting.
One question I have for you guys is like, were you guys under any illusion that Rocky was going to die in that part? Like, it was very clear to me. Like, yeah, he's pretty messed up, but like, there's no way he's going to die. Like, I don't know if we were meant to like be really like, oh man, maybe he's actually dead. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I
like,
do have the stakes of like feeling like you failed your friend and you failed all of Earth as a direct result of failing your friend. And that I think was quite effective. But yeah, I didn't think he was actually like, we were just going to end the book on chapter 15 or something.
Well, I didn't think it was gonna. I mean, I don't think that was what he was going for. I think he was going for like, oh, maybe Rocky's actually gonna die. But like now that Grace knows that he has a bunch of extra fuel and he can get back by himself, and like he'll be a hero like to the human race or whatever. But I think that's what he's trying to go for, but like I was like, there's no way he's gonna kill him already. Like
now that we've seen the dynamic between the two characters, it's almost hard to imagine what it would be like to not have that rapport, because it's so much of the like the meat of this book.
I think that this type of a moment in the book or in any book really can veer like in two different directions, where you feel like either the author is trying to convince you that the character may actually in fact be dead, or the character is inviting you, or his intention is more so for you to think about, okay, if I don't believe that he's going to die, what are the stakes here? Because the stakes are sometimes death, and then other times the stakes are he's injured, clearly, even if he's not dead. So how is he going to save this guy's life when their atmospheres are incompatible? What is he going to risk, right? And in risking something like your own life, you form a sort of bond with the other creature that kind of defies logic, because you're both so alien to each other, and what it would take to keep the other alive will almost definitely cause you to maybe die.
You totally hit the nail on the head, Priya. Element of self-sacrifice is something that really elevates the stakes and also their relationship. It's one thing to be like joking around when there's no danger, but to know that someone's there when like the chips are down and like when things get really tough is pretty universal.
And also, the stakes are established in the fact that these two individuals are both their planet's last hope for survival. So if either of them sacrifices themselves for the other, they're really pinning their hope on the other, that you're now not only going to save your own planet, but also my planet. Right. And that is a very fascinating idea to play with, I think. And so I think in this moment, it doesn't really matter whether or not we believe that Rocky's going to die or not. If we're 100% convinced that he's not going to die, the point is to consider, but why create this scenario? And the reason for the scenario is that now you have this impossible friendship that's like blossomed out of such a weird situation.
At the very end of this section, in chapter 21, there's this very brief conversation between the two characters. And they're at the end of their discussion that you mentioned earlier, Priya, about like, why do we think at the same speed? What about our gravity? What about our evolution? And sort of the conclusion to that is nothing scientific after their scientific discussion. But Rocky says, another similarity. You and me both willing to die for our people. And then they clarify, not all Iridians willing to die for others. And Ryland chuckles and says, not all humans either. And then Rocky says, you and me are good people. And that's a really sweet way for it to end. And it's like almost to me, the total erosion of the difference between a human and an Iridian is like at that moment, they're just people and what their values say about them.
I guess like my point is like it could have been just as effective if there wasn't the death fake out, right? Like if he had just been like, you know, super sick and like, or he'd known that like he's curled up into a ball and like that because like he kind of said, oh maybe I don't know, maybe he's just curling into a ball and like maybe he's just like, you know, resting or whatever. But like they kind of do like the death fake out and like I don't know, like it seemed unnecessary because it was obvious that it's not going to happen.
I didn't really read that as a death fake out. Like just going back to what I was like trying to get at earlier was that I think that, or the way that I read it, I think that if he was just kind of sick, there wouldn't have been as much of an urgency in Ryland to like come up with these impossible methods of like pulling him back from the brink of death. Because if he was like, oh, he's just sick, he just needs some downtime, he'll recover, I don't think he would have gone to such lengths to try and save him and come up with all these different ways. So I think that's the reason for putting him at the brink of death. Now, like I didn't read it as him being at risk of dying, because the way that the story structure has been created, I didn't feel this way the first time I listened to it, and nor did I feel this way this time that he was actually at risk of dying. It's not important for me, the reader, to think he's at risk of dying, but it's important for the character in that situation to think that he's dying, because I, as the reader, know that this is a story, but the character who is in the story doesn't know that it's a story. So he has to believe it, not me. That's the way I read it.
You're not trapped on a spaceship too, so it's easier for you to like calmly and coolly evaluate these things.
Yeah, I'll be like, well, Andy Weir's not going to kill him, but like Ryland's not like, Andy Weir's not going to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, maybe that'll help you break out of your disillusionment about thinking super zoomed out and how this will be filmed and whether the death will happen is maybe, I don't know, zoom in. Maybe that'll help.
I did like how it kind of turned the that trope on itself, where like his efforts actually like like all the efforts that he went through besides putting him in the airlock like were actually like harmful to him. Like all the stuff that he did, like
I love that.
So
it's like
relatable. You ever like put your effort towards something?
yeah, all for like actually the detriment of like with the goal that you're trying to accomplish. Like the I mean, like, but it's good that he did. Like he all the injury that he took on was mostly from moving him, right? And so yeah, that part was good, and not like good, but you know what I mean. It was good to read.
I think it also served as like a reminder that you may think that you know what you need to know based off of your human understanding of science and biology and so on, but still there are going to be gaps that you're not going to be able to fill in this short time of knowing each other. And this is one of those gaps where he's like, I have the best intentions. I'm going to work so hard to solve this problem for you. And in fact, it is that you are creating a problem, not solving one. And that really reminds us again, these two have actually no idea of each other's biology, and that little bit of like observation and interaction has not bridged all these gaps.
And not just each other, right? Like it's a reminder, which I thought was so keen for you to point out, that your guesses can be wrong. Just because a lot of your guesses have been right and have brought you this far, you can communicate, you can grow enough fuel to like propel a ship. That doesn't mean that all of your guesses are right. And that's sort of the nature of scientific experimentation. You can form hypotheses that will appear to be right and then end up wasting more of your time, and evolution might propel the next mutation, but that doesn't always mean that it's well adapted. It's just a change. So maybe a little deeper than the story demands, but it's a good reminder.
I'll move on to my next criticism. So this whole time, they talked all like this whole book. They've been talking about the ship and like how it's like covered in astrophage, and everything is like kind of built on astrophage, right?
The Hail Mary ship?
Yeah, the Hail Mary ship, like how like the hull is covered in it, like they have tanks of it, they have everything. The Beatles are powered by astrophage, everything. So it's like just it wouldn't be possible without astrophage, right? So like it's obviously like super important to the operation of the ship. The very second they introduced the predator of of astrophage, I was like, that's gonna get on the ship and it's gonna like destroy the thing, and the ship's gonna be in danger because of it. Like, I don't know if it was meant to be that obvious, but like it was very obvious to me. I don't know. How about you guys? I don't know if that bothered you as well, or even thought about it, but like that it kind of bothered me.
I can see your criticism there. I really can. Like, as scientists, do they not consider that this is the most logical problem that you're going to encounter next? And I think that there are a lot of these types of little logical issues with even the biology and use of astrophage, although I can't articulate it with as much jargon as I would like love to be able to. But I feel like instinctively I'm like, but wait, if this, then why not this? Like I feel like that a lot of times with the astrophage explanations too. And then when you introduce like the predator, I'm like, but but and I'm like, okay, yeah, so that's a thing. But then also I feel like trying to put myself in the shoes of these characters, they're sleep deprived. They're just like trying to stay afloat. And they I think after a certain point, after you do so much math and science, maybe your brain like develops a blind spot. And I was like, this is the blind spot that they didn't logic their way out of before bringing this thing on the ship.
Yeah, I mean, he does go through a lot, like talking about how he gets on painkillers and everything. I don't know. It just seems like it would have been super like it should have been like the fundamental thing. Like, hey, here's the thing that's predator, like that the predator or the thing that powers the entirety of the ship. Maybe let's like put every protection we can around it, not getting out and eating everything else on the ship. And I didn't see any of that kind of like preparation or carefulness to do it. And maybe that goes with character. Maybe that was like kind of the point of it. But like I don't know, it bothered me. Like I, as like a layman, like was able to like know at the very moment like this thing is gonna be a problem and it's gonna destroy something and the ship's gonna be broken because of it.
You're making me kick myself, Dan, that we didn't like query you in earlier episodes. Like, how would you solve the astrophage problem? Because if I'm going to play devil's advocate, and how dare you guys make me stick up for Andy Weir's writing? I will never forgive either of you. But the idea that it's a biological problem is, I think, not inherently obvious. You know, it's something that's destroying the sun. And I think a lot of the initial solve is like, oh, how do we get rid of it? How do we destroy it? How do we eliminate it? And thinking of it as more of a food chain problem, I don't think is, maybe it becomes really inherent because they harp on a lot about it in this section, but I don't think it's like the next obvious step.
Oh no! Sorry, I maybe I like was not clear. Like that part is super clever, and I was like, that was a cool reveal to me. Like when I read it, I was like, oh, that's a good idea. Like they have something that could use the astrophage. But when they said that, I was like, well, that thing is going to eat this astrophage on the ship, right? Like so now he needs to be super careful about it, and he just never was. And it's like, all right, well, I know what's going to happen. Like the ship is going to get broken because the Taumeoba is going to come on the ship and it's going to eat all the fuel. Is going to do something and put them in danger. But the actual like biological reveal was really interesting to me, I thought.
Yeah, it'd be very satisfying, I think, if it's like they're desperate, they don't know their solve, and then they discover, that there are in fact evidence of a biological environment, and they also observe that something is reducing the output of the energy, which must mean that like the astrophage are decreasing, and then they find out that it's a predator, and in that moment they like realize that it's on board, rather than all of their efforts being we'll like think about this problem very hard and we'll make this tank and then we'll write a chapter and a half about making chain links and sort of have that blind spot. So yeah, that's a free note for Hollywood to use.
Also, the other thing is that I think that one way to possibly have explained this on the page without losing your plot, like, your whole plot device, is to just say that we didn't realize that bringing such a small sample on board was going to immediately contaminate all the fuel supply. Is that like this is a small sample that we're bringing on board just to study, and we don't understand until we bring it on board how quickly it moves and works. So yeah, like something really basic like that could have eliminated the problem of someone sitting here and thinking, well, obviously this was going to happen, right? So like all the pages and pages and pages that we get about like why the ship is spinning and the G forces and the blah, blah, blah. And then come on, like give us some acknowledgement of your plot hole. If you acknowledge your plot hole and give me like even a flimsy explanation, I'll buy it.
I think the explanation is that like he was on a bunch of painkillers. You need to think about it. Like I think that's what they were trying to like. I mean, I think Grace says as much, right, during that thing. When he realizes like the generator is all messed up because of it. I don't think that's a good enough explanation. Like I think it kind of short sells like Grace, like, and his intelligence to like think about, kind of he's doing all those like amazing things, right? But I think like for some reason it just I don't know, it just bothered me.
I'll give you my criticism in return for that. My criticism is that there is constantly this contradiction that I feel keeps happening between Rocky saying that my science is not as good as yours, but then he is like a brilliant engineer, like the most amazing, right? And he does math at like a speed that a human could not, and he remembers everything. So on the one hand, I feel like sometimes he uses the fact that Iridian science is not as good as like human science when it suits him. And then at other times, he's like, no, but they're so brilliant. They can figure all of this stuff out that humans could never figure out. So
It's an insecure alien with imposter syndrome, Priya.
yeah, that's true. He has imposter syndrome.
Rocky
But
has massive imposter syndrome.
But yeah, I just feel like sometimes the explanation is given for like, okay, well, we didn't even know about relativity, but then at the same time, you're able to travel. You built spaceships and you can travel in space, but also we didn't have computers and like things like that. Like it just doesn't add up. Like how can you build a spaceship without and do space travel without knowing about relativity? So it like my brain doesn't like.
Sure. I mean, I could have used the entire book. If we're all doing criticisms, I want in on the fun. I don't need to ever hear about gene markers or coma testing ever again because there's such little payoff where it occupies so much of the narrative. And then in practicality, these carefully selected people for this coma gene die from their comas. Like, first thing that happens. And
I completely agree.
we're not really interested in like why, nor do we like seem to be investigating why. It's just like a niggling concern for Ryland that he might have the fuel to return but then die from the coma anyway, which is still a stake. In fact, it's like a stronger stake without this like genetic shield that they've erected. So yeah, I baffled as to why that's included.
I completely agree because I feel like the only function that these comas serve is to have Ryland wake up in a disoriented state and for him to have to figure out why there are two corpses with him. And
Which is
besides,
fine. You can have all of that. You can literally have every aspect, including the comas, without this like deep dive into like, now we're going to go to a Thai scientist who's an expert on comas and she's going to give us phlebotomy and we're
Yeah.
going to test that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. And also, I think that it serves as like a fairly kind of forced way to tell us why Ryland ended up on this mission because he had
Yeah.
this like gene. So it's kind of like, well, all of these things had to happen for Ryland to end up on the mission. He had to have this gene. That there had to be an explosion that killed the other people who also had the gene. And I'm like, at what point do you find a simpler explanation for why Ryland ended up on the mission?
I think that's where Andy Weir's more popular, or currently more popular, book gets a real leg up. Because in The Martian, the character faces really, really similar stakes. Unlikely hero, trapped, alone, all seemingly likely that he'll die, and then is given this like renewed sense of hope and faces these trials. But we start from a position that this is one of the people chosen to explore Mars. Like, this is already an astronaut, and then we don't need to get into nearly as much explanation as we do by phrasing someone as like a very lowly high school teacher, and then also needing to get in just a few short pages to him being a leading expert on astrophage, and even him being a leading expert on astrophage is not enough to qualify him. Like, we need even more explanation where, yeah, it ends up being pretty forced.
I think what might have been interesting is if the coma gene was actually like a determining factor why they couldn't send somebody who would have been perfect to go. And then we didn't get that,
Oh.
you know? Like,
Yeah,
it's just like
that's
they had like this coma gene that's like 1 in 7,000 people or whatever, but the best people still make it. Like, they all just happen to have it, right? And so, like, who are the people who didn't make it? Like, you know, maybe this mission would have gone better if they had just sent it. But yeah, we never know. Well, maybe we do. I
Instead
don't
of
know. So,
cringy people who can't go, we could have compelling characters who are unable to from their biology, rather than cringy people who can.
speaking of, let's get into it.
Let's get into the cringe.
The cringe gene. Turns out they're all positive for it.
Which apparently I don't have because it didn't bother. I mean, I thought it was funny. like it didn't bother me. I like the sex part and like it's just they're just kind of two dorks like that are written very well, but like whatever. Like they're just meant to be. It's more humorous. I think it's meant to be that way.
I've yet to meet a dork, though. I've met many dorks in my life. Many.
That's why I'm glad we have the three of us on, co-hosting because we are affected differently. We do disagree a lot.
I have a very low tolerance, I feel, for cringe, and I have met many dorks. I personally might actually be a dork, but I have yet to hear one who just launches into this type of a conversation of over disclosing, too much self-disclosure,
Too much
TMI. And lately my friends and I have been saying that TMI actually to me means tell me immediately. But in this case, please don't tell me immediately. I never asked for this information. As I'm reading, I wanted none of this, and I got so much. They spend a lot of time on this, and
so much time.
Too much time, and I was not here for it. For those who might be confused whilst listening, it's that DuBois reveals a relationship he's in with Shapiro, the two scientists who end up both dying in a horrific explosion, very shortly after this disclosure happens. They are in a relationship of a very physical nature, and he reveals this as like the second sentence he says to Ryland upon meeting him. So,
it's the way you paused and like sounded weary and gave a wearied sigh, and then said DuBois, and I was like, oh my god, Priya's about to start reciting. She's about to start reading. But I'm glad you gave context for listeners and for readers. It is a bizarre choice to make your character just so immediately unlikable. And I think that's the main criticism of why the other characters, like they don't really show up in our summaries. We don't speak about them because they're not really characters. They don't speak the way that normal people speak or even comprehensible people speak. They don't have an internal logic or internal lives that we can glimpse. They are certainly plot points at different points, but it would be extremely credulous reporting to treat them like characters.
Right. That's why I said that I've known many dorks, and I have been a dork, and I am a dork, but like there are nuances here to the dorky scientist trope, right? People
dork
don't talk.
Is the explanation for this behavior, you mean?
Yeah, like dorkiness does not explain this behavior. Also, I think he's trying to present like the quirky scientist type who is kind of socially unaware and does not, maybe a bit of a sociopath, but I don't think that it works that way. I think like I find it way more interesting because I find it way more interesting if like the side characters are presented with a certain degree of nuance. And I feel like this fails to do that.
I'm going to once again point us back to Three Body and say that like, even though he doesn't write characters very well, some of the side quests in that book make sense to me, even when we don't spend a lot of time with those characters. The scientist who falls into a black hole gets his own dorky autistic trope explanation, and I had found that way more palatable. And there's far better examples of people appearing for a short amount of time, like in the White Lotus. That is a book that's been a series that's been highly praised because Mike White seems to imagine these full, rich, deep lives for even minor characters, and that makes it pretty interesting to keep watching.
I love that show.
Exactly.
Well, you broke the glass, so I'm gonna also talk about Three Body Problem. So is this worse than Imaginary Girlfriend?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, it's worse than Imaginary Girlfriend because I'll tell you why. Because as much as imaginary girlfriend, and people who haven't read Three Body and are listening to this are going to be so confused about what the hell is imaginary girlfriend. Wouldn't you like to know? So why don't you go read?
Read book 2, The Dark Forest, and then
Yes.
listen to our podcast and the spoiler cast.
This is the plug for the Dark Forest.
We don't have
Imaginary
ads.
Girlfriend.
We don't have ads. We might as well be like, sponsored by like
That's
Lisa Shin.
true.
Yeah, sponsored by the Dark Forest.
Sponsored by Rehydrate.
Yeah, so I'll tell you why imaginary girlfriend doesn't bother me as much. And I think it's because Uochi is bored out of his mind and he doesn't want to do the job that he's been assigned to do. So whilst he is bored, he has this idea in his head that he is going to create an imaginary character in his head, but he's not a storyteller. So he goes too far into the direction of actually trying to create a girlfriend for himself in his head. And I think that when someone is dealing with the kind of psychosis that he's going through, where he's also at the same time trying to obtain like this really old liquor. I have just gone off on a stream of consciousness.
But this
I am so
he
sorry.
did it all before Wallfacer. He did it when he was
did it before.
Yeah, like it was only
No,
yeah,
he
yeah,
didn't,
yeah.
did he?
No, it was with his.
He had already gotten like the
No, it was with his girlfriend because his girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean it gets deeper, and that's why I would say that was worse. I'm here to disagree with you live. It was worse because it was interspersed with good writing that I really cared about.
Okay.
So I was unable to skim. I had to read it thoroughly.
Yeah, it's when he becomes Wallfacer that he gets the manifestation of his imaginary girlfriend.
Okay, so it's coming back then. Okay.
Yeah. But remember, like, there's like a whole chapter about him, like imagining it, and then he becomes obsessed with it, and then he like leaves his girlfriend or whatever because of it, because he felt. Anyway, this is all unimportant to people.
This is all really irrelevant. But
no, I'm gonna make it relevant. I am changing my mind.
Oh,
yes.
I'm changing my mind. It was worse. This is not as bad as what I would argue, much better writer did in his book. So I guess maybe that means that Andy Weir gets a pass.
All right. It's much shorter. This is like only a couple sentences here and there.
So much shorter. It's only so much easier to skim. But yeah, we did break the glass in terms of speaking about the cringe and then talking about Three Body.
You can totally edit out my defense, by the way.
No, it's all good content.
My defense went down a stream of consciousness and it took a few detours along the way. But I think my memory failed me there. I thought that this was a much briefer, maybe I blocked it out,
Yes, I was just going to say, that's your mind protecting you.
Yeah. I would say for me, the even worse part about that whole relationship, like I think the whole point of like the sexual relationship between the two was like to show that like that they're close to each other, right? Like that would be the reason that they would be together for the accident, right? Like it's all just like a quirky way to get them in the same place so they can explode, right? But I think it's even worse for me that Stratt allowed that to happen at all. Like there even is like a point of like they can't fly in the same helicopter, they can't be together, like they have to be apart, and she just lets them have sex the whole time, lets them hang out or whatever. Like, even though she's so worried about like people killing them, killing each other in space. Like I don't know. That seemed that's a much worse sin to me than a little bit of bad writing and trying to like force humor into that.
Isn't it her concern that like it should all be same sex? Like I thought that was her stand, that she's against it. But maybe I'm being too generous.
Was it? I can't. Yeah.
This was like, it was almost cartoonish the way I thought that they caused the explosion by being negligent and doing something stupid. Like as I was reading this, I was like, did they clock out when they weren't supposed to get together and do something that led to this explosion happening? Because it does feel very negligent to allow that to continue on the job, that too, because they were in an earlier scene, they were like, we have a break soon. Do you want to meet in the bathroom? Oh, gross, right? And I was like, you guys are two professionals working on a very, very, very high profile project. You cannot be doing this during your breaks. Like, you have to wait until the day is over at the very least. So I was like, did they cause this explosion through negligence? I don't know. Or I wondered. I wondered if that was the angle he was going for.
I think that's a reasonable reading into it. You know, like they were being, unprofessional. They were being like not. Yeah, like they weren't being careful. Like I think that definitely could have happened. Like they got caught up in whatever, and then they didn't pay attention to the Bunsen burner being on or whatever, and then everything, the asteroid flew up.
I took a film analysis class in high school. It's like pretty much the only elective that I had space for in my schedule. But one of the first movies that we watched together was Jaws. And although I'd seen Jaws, I had not like film analysis seen Jaws. And as a little refresher, the first victims of the shark are a teenage boy and a teenage girl who like wander around the beach and then go into the ocean to fool around. And there's a bit of an implication that they're introduced as sinners and they're being punished for their lechery. And that sort of kicks off a lot of those major plot points. So it is possible that they're being introduced and then being like, held up as maybe examples. Maybe it's subconscious from Andy Weir wanting to punish the people who get to fool around, but it's baffling that this was included.
Where my mind went to was, and I think they even mention it in the book, it's like some kind of sabotage, right? So like, I'm sure you guys have all seen Contact, where the scene where the ship blows up because of some sabotage by some zealot groups. Like that's where my mind went to when this happened.
Like Scooby-Doo level of like.
I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I'm guessing like some outside group, some doomsday group or whatever would. I'm making out fiction that's like not included in the book or not even like supported in the book at all. But like that's where my mind went to. Was that like
all canon?
Yeah.
They do they do wonder about that though. They do wonder in the scene.
Yeah, I think they do. I think there is a sentence, right, that says like, "Oh, did someone do this on purpose or whatever?" That's where my mind went to when it blew up. But then, I mean, these are all good points. I think maybe they talk more about it later, but I think they're all equally possible.
I have one more issue that I had.
Yeah. Let's go for it.
I think when they're asking the crew their preferred method of dying, and then this one crew member comes in with, "Get me heroin." And I get it, okay? I get it that what he's trying to do here, he's trying to show how dark this can get, right? The idea that you're sending people off knowing that they're on a suicide mission. And if they had to like pick their method of death, like the idea of picking how you're going to die is a very, very dark thing. So a lot of characters will be like, why don't I have like a fun experience before I die? But I feel like it was a little bit bizarre how deep he went into it, where it wasn't just like, yeah, get me some heroin. And then you could have stopped it there. But then this character is like,
I was a good girl all my life.
I know. Like, I think at a certain point, we veered into a kind of borderline terrain of kind of almost sort of glorifying something that should not be. And I don't know if my interpretation or my reading is way off, but I just felt like saying like, oh, the first 2 or 3 times are fun and then it's all downhill from there. And I'm like, maybe don't do that. Maybe just be like, yeah, give me, I don't know, MDMA and let me go off that way. Like, and then stop it there. I didn't quite like the way that the train of thought progressed in that direction.
I mean, I think we've seen a little bit of evidence as to why this comes up. It's like the reason he has these narcotic painkillers. And then like maybe there'll be a reason for DuBois' like nitrogen request for suffocation and a reason for Yao's request for a handgun. Like maybe they'll be relevant. And I think they're just trying to defend that, would be my guess.
Perhaps. I honestly, like, I don't remember. I have no memory of whether that comes up again.
I pulled those names from the depths of my memory. It was so hard to remember who these people were. But I do remember someone wants to suffocate to death in a very sciencey way. The other person wants a gun that he like specifies the make and model. And it's again a weird little like, I don't know, this feels like a very indulgent, sin heavy chapter. Like we're gonna talk a lot about violence, we're gonna talk a lot about like drug abuse, and then we'll have this little sexual side excursion. And I could have done without all of it, but I did notice that that was very much a theme of sort of those flashbacks.
Like he's planting seeds that he wants to germinate later.
I hate that choice of words, but feel free to make your point.
Yeah, I mean, not a great analogy, but it's the first one that came to mind.
I don't blame you.
I realized as I was saying it what I was saying.
I was way more bothered that like they're allowing him to have a gun on board. Like
I was
could
thinking that too.
Like how are they gonna let him just have like a gun? Like he's gonna shoot himself and then like the bullet's gonna go through the hole and then
men
like
and women together because they might kill each other if tensions get too high. But let's give him a lock and just say.
I mean, I was just thinking of like just practically like he's gonna shoot through the hole and the whole thing is gonna explode and then they're gonna lose all the data they have.
Exactly. How are they gonna preserve? Like even if you know it's a suicide mission, a gun inside a spaceship. I mean, again, that's I think where the Martian's just a little bit more refined. Is there's this need to heat something or like trigger, I can't remember if it's a food-based need or a science-based need to create a flame, but then they really grapple with the fact that like the last thing on Earth NASA wants is the ability for anything to catch on fire here. So all of humanity's efforts for decades have been focused on eliminating that possibility, and the way that it's even possible is that one of the crewmates' personal items was a wooden cross, which he was allowed to bring, and then he's able to like shave that into kindling. And that just feels like it's a stretch, but it's a stretch we can make together, rather than like you do need to die, so gun.
It feels like Stratt would have like nixed that, but what do we know?
Another inconsistent character.
I do feel like what we're discovering with all of these critiques here is that this book may have benefited from one more revision. Like when you're writing to make all of your plot make sense, you end up dumping everything that's in your brain onto the page, and that is the writing process. But every round of revisions ends up removing what doesn't need to be there and refining what does need to be there. And I feel like one more round of that might have alleviated at least half of these problems that we're
or a round.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
show your work to people, hire editors, people.
I mean, I'm sure this went through a lot of editing. But at the same time, I feel like overall, would you say that we're still enjoying the story? Because I feel like we did focus on a lot of our criticisms here, but overall, how are we feeling about this story in general? If we abandon these criticisms.
So I would characterize my criticisms as more nitpicks, right? Overall, the story's great. Like I enjoy it. Like I read through it really fast. I was interested in what's going to happen. Yeah, overall, like I really enjoy it. Yeah, and these things are just like things that like stick in my brain, like when I'm reading them, but it doesn't like ruin the story for me, right? Like it's not like there's no fundamental like flaw with the story that I see. Like it's it's fun. It's a fun read. I think Grace is an interesting character. The relationship between him and Rocky are great. Um, yeah, so overall, I definitely enjoy. I'm looking forward to the other parts. I do want to like mention one more thing that I did want to end on this actually is like one thing that I did enjoy. It's also another small thing is like all the pop culture references. Like I think were like it's kind of like a refreshing change of pace, right? You think of like Foundation or all or Dune or whatever, like they're very sterile and like they're very like kind of detached from any kind of our reality. But like this story is very much like in our pop culture, all the stuff around the Beatles stuff and like him having a realization by saying a hard day's night, right? Like all that stuff is like it just like it just brings delight when you read the book, and I think that brings a lot to the story. So yeah, overall, definitely really enjoy in the story.
Oh, that's sweet. So if you made it an hour in, turns out we do like it enough to keep going. We are going to finish this book.
Do you how about you, Talia? Do you feel the same? Like, are you still like what are your overall thoughts on the book?
I point you to the impressions I had when we were selecting this for the next season of Rehydrate. I don't think my opinion has changed much. It's like very cool that a lot more people will be reading. I think that's always been the goal of this podcast is like we ran out of people to talk to about the things that we'd read, and we wanted to find other people and maybe even encourage people to read these works along with us, either to enjoy them or maybe even to complain about them. That being said, I wouldn't recommend this book outright without sort of an external motive. So I was glad to have the upcoming movie and the ability to share it with like one person who's read it, one person who hasn't, to sort of explore another work of science fiction. But yeah, this is my impression of how Andy Weir is and writes.
So I agree with you, Dan. That's pretty much my take as well on all of these things that I fixate on. I think I fixate on them a lot more now than I did back then when I first read it, because I think I'm approaching it much more from having a better understanding and grasp on writing now, from that perspective. So the writer brain kind of turns on, and I'm like, well, this didn't need to be there. This should have been there. So from a technical standpoint, I can find all of these little nits to pick. But I think that a lot of what I do now is I review books that I write short reviews for books that I read on the Bookstagram, and sometimes I find myself having lots of nits to pick with a book, and then it still ends up being like a 4 or a 5-star read for me, and I can't explain it. Like it's like whatever was working, it's so far outweighed all of these little things that I'm pointing out from a writing standpoint that like it doesn't even matter at the end of the day. It's about like the feeling that it left me with. And I feel like what elevates this book for me past all of these writing related criticisms that I have is the character of Rocky. And I feel like to be able to create this kind of a dynamic between an alien and a human in this type of a environment, and they're both working towards a common shared problem, is such a fascinating idea to me. And so like the larger concept and this friendship that's at the forefront of the story kind of forgives all of the stuff that's going on in the layers that are underneath for me. And yeah, I find myself really enjoying the story overall when I don't like take a magnifying glass and look at all of these other things.
All right. Well, I think we did it. Yeah, thank you very much for listening. Please check out Rehydrate.space for release episodes, reading lists, pronunciation guides, and all the other stuff we put up there. Please leave comments by emailing us at rehydrate@fastmail.com, on Mastodon at rehydrate@mass.to, and Rehydrate on Blue Sky. And we'll see you next time for the conclusion of Project Hail Mary.